and welcome to a Byte of Analytics brought to you by Iteration Insights. I am your host, Deanna Arciniega, an analytics consultant. My passions include storytelling with data and empowering others through their data-driven journey. If you are new to the Byte of Analytics podcast, our main goal here is to provide insights and spread knowledge about data analytics. We do this by bringing together thought leaders, industry experts, and update the community on topics regarding the ever-changing technology and the analytics landscape. And this month is a really special month. We're going to be stepping into a high-level conversation that goes beyond analytics. So what do we mean by this? Well, as you know, analytics can be made really difficult, especially with data quality challenges that typically stem from poorly governed and managed source systems. This month, for the entire month of February, we as Iteration Insights, collaborating along with partners at Fidelity Factory, we're putting together a spotlight on governance and governing the Power Platform suite of products. We're doing this because if done right, governance can help out the entire end-to-end data lifecycle, which includes both data production and data consumption. So with that, we're going to welcome our panelists here today. Todd and Chris, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Hi, my name is Todd Ginther from Fidelity Factory. Really happy to be here talking about governance with you, not just now, but through blogs and so forth as we go through the whole month of February. Governance is something that is super important, is close to my heart. My role at Fidelity Factory, in addition to wearing a hat for project manager, business analyst, I'm also involved in the Center of Excellence, and that's all about putting the people, the processes in place to govern Power Platform development at organizations.
And I'm Chris Sorensen, President and Chief Data Advocate at Iteration Insights. And like Todd, one of my passions is governance, because as Deanna mentioned in the introduction, doing data analytics is very hard if you do not have good quality data coming from your source systems. So governance, especially with the Power Platform, really allows us to take a look holistically at things that are happening from a data production standpoint and ultimately a data consumption standpoint. And if we can get both of those acting in concert, the sky's the limit in terms of what we can do with low code, no code.
Thanks so much, Chris. And that definitely leads us into our discussion. I did just want to first take a step back and just talk about the Power Platform and what it has enabled business users to do, from like Power BI or Power Apps and Power Automate. Chris and Todd, do you want to elaborate more on how much these platforms have helped businesses?
Sure, I'll first talk about with Power BI. So Power BI has really enabled business users that, a lot of times we see typically using Excel for doing data analytics. It really helps the whole process of gathering, cleansing your data to make sure you've got the data we need for reporting, and then really helps to enhance the creation, the distribution of this information to end users, and does it in a very interactive way with security considerations in mind. And ultimately, if we bring all this together nicely, can really help automate processes that typically for a lot of business users have been very manual over the course of time. So that's the dream when it comes to Power BI and using it within the Power Platform. The next trick is then elevating people's skills and governing it properly, which once again kind of goes back to the sky's the limit.
And from the Power Apps, Power Automate, Power Virtual Assistant, the Power Platform is broad. And these pieces, just like Chris had mentioned, the sky is the limit with them as well. And a huge advantage, a huge strength of this low code, no code, and in particular, the Power Platform from Microsoft, is that it allows the business to go from idea to deliverable, idea to automation or app in such a short time frame. The Power Platform overall, it contains Power BI, it contains Power Apps, Power Automate, Power Virtual Assistant. It's broad. And the same advantages, the same strengths that Chris had mentioned for Power BI, this also exists for Power Apps, Power Automate, Power Virtual Agent. This lets the business take their ideas, make them reality in such a quick fashion. This is hyper agile development. This lets them take a backlog of ideas of these opportunities that are just waiting to add value to the business, and they can execute on those.
It's really crazy, like how amazing or how far we've come. Like these products are within are they within the last 10 years? Maybe.
I might call it maybe the last 3 to 4 years. Would you say that, Todd?
Yes.
Yeah, this idea has been out there for longer, but oh my goodness, it wasn't practical. It was low code, no code for IT required.
And it's just like it's grown like crazy. It's expanded so much. And what is interesting is what I wanted to ask you guys really are what are the challenges that this brings? Like what are the cons to this these amazing tools that give us so many opportunities?
I think a big con, I really want to just couch that term because I look at this overall as very positive, but it's only positive if you go in with your eyes wide open and you're really intentional about what you're hoping to accomplish. So one of the cons I'd say is of opening the door to accessible development. It allows the business to start this development, to really embrace this without IT knowledge. If IT hasn't set up governance processes, if they're not really aware of what's happening in the Power Platform, this is there. It's growing. In Windows 11, Power Automate Desktop is part of the OS. It will be given to people. This is something that you do need to be aware of, and just be sure that you're having this rolled out, used intentionally within your organization. Another risk associated with that are business processes, critical business processes being automated without your knowledge. And if they are, how are these being supported? If you don't have support for these new developments, this is something that's going to be, is it just sitting with the people that are doing the development? Is this something that will be called into the service desk? Are they even aware of this? All these aspects you really do need to think about. And again, just be intentional about it. Don't look at this all as push back and stop. Take a breather, take a look at governance. This is what we're here to help you with this month to really help you get started down this journey.
Yeah, and I would, I'm going to start with some of the cons first. I want to start on the con side of the world and then kind of move into the positive side of things is, one of the things that can be a challenge is if organizations aren't aware of the usage of these tools and how people are using them and the power behind them, we can really start entering a Wild West situation in a lot of organizations where users are just running without any real controls or direction, kind of doing their own things. And in a lot of ways, in the Power BI side, I like to jokingly say that without a little bit of governance, it's almost like pushing all the Excel problems organizations had for the last 15 to 20 years. You're just pushing them into Power BI for another, $10 plus per month. And that's not really helping the situation out. So that's the con side of the thing. The pros are that these low code tools that really start allowing you to expose information are really starting to drive a discussions on collaboration communication. So as I was mentioning before in the Excel world, where people would typically work in their silos by themselves for many years, we're finding that with the Power Platform and Power BI in particular here, that these conversations are bubbling their way to the top and people are being a lot more collaborative and communicative about what's being done in the organization and saying, hey, I didn't realize you were building that. I'm kind of doing something similar. Why don't we pool our ideas and come up with one thing? So that has been really good. And in a lot of ways, that isn't just Power BI itself driving a lot of that collaboration and communication. I would say, organizations as a whole, maybe even kind of driven through some of the pandemic things, are becoming a lot more collaborative as a whole. And then you kind of wrap in some technologies like Teams and behind it. That's really kind of elevated the discussion as well. So I think there's a lot of organizational things that have changed over the years that are really getting people to come out of their silos and work together, collaborate and communicate, use the technologies. And tools like Power BI for sure are starting to take advantage of that. And if organizations can wrap some governance around this, once again, you're going to get tired of me saying this, but the sky's really the limit on this. And yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about governance a little bit later on here, but that's some of the pros and cons that I see around the platform.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, now that we have seen what happens when your organization doesn't have governance, and let's just take a step back and look at what is governance as a whole. What does that look like for organizations to implement governance?
Well, I think from my perspective, governance is really, it's had a bad name in the future. In fact, a lot of times I've joked that the G in governance was for grown. People go, whenever you heard governance, because they would think about slowing things down in bureaucracy and politics and stifling innovation and things like that. So governance in the new world order, in my mind, is really meant to kind of bring people together to drive those conversations and provide them with the standards and process and the skills of a team to actually start driving all of that work forward and keep it under control. So, one of the best ways to kind of start reining things in is if people are having discussions with each other and talking about what they're doing and, consolidating ideas and stuff like that, is just by virtue of having those conversations, things slowly start to become better governed and better managed. So I like to take the large G out of governance now and make it a small G, and it's lightweight. It's meant to kind of help innovation when done properly.
I love the idea about the lower G as well. This is something that is quick. The Power Platform is about quick development, quickly taking your ideas and making them real as well. And the governance, if it is capital G, if it is huge and heavy, you're basically taking this strength, pulling it backwards into the old way of doing things. Chris had mentioned earlier around collaboration, working together. IT and the business can work in partnership to deliver these solutions. The old way of doing things, business added something to a backlog, IT looked at this backlog, it was prioritized, ranked. A lot of ideas, most of them were never delivered on. IT is limited in size, limited in budget, and they just take the biggest wins and run with that, leaving a lot on the table through no fault of their own, just the way things are set up. By understanding how the Power Platform fits into an organization's goals, this is one of the first steps of governance. Just understanding the platform, understanding the strength of what it can deliver, and then setting up the governance to match that. Don't take the Power Platform and all the strengths, ignore those, and fit this into something else that it is not. You're losing so much value just leaving it on the table. Be intentional about setting up the guardrails. It's something that you do need to have something in place to make sure that the organization is protected, the data is protected, that standards are adhered to. Even little things you can decide, are we going to give some best practices? These are the colors we use. These are the way the logos are used. Naming conventions for files, for variables. How is this information shared? All these guardrails do need to be set up, but you can't just leave it at that. You have to look at the roadway as well. By setting up a roadway for development, this is something that focuses on enablement. It focuses on how do you get people up to speed? How do you get them trained sufficiently? Kind of the least amount to start with to get them started, and then add to it as you need to. Don't do waterfall methodology where everything has to be up front. Then you go to the next, then you go to the next. This is something that is iterative.
I was just going to add to you, Todd. I really love how you kind of think of governance as educating more than securing. It's more about people communicating and coming together and telling each other what's going on and educating them on the processes and the governance, not just about putting security measures, but it's also about educating them on the tool, on the policies, on the procedures, on how things should be done so that things don't go off the rails.
Oh my goodness, yes. It is so much more than creating policy, creating these rules that are to be followed, handing them to these citizen developers and just hoping that it succeeds. IT truly is a partner with a business for this. And that partnership, when I speak about enablement, I really mean that in the best way. It is providing the training. It is, IT has the option to set up a community. Have a community of practice within your organization. Let these people communicate within this forum, within the organization, to learn from each other. There is so much opportunity here that you're growing this development organization beyond IT. And it's exciting. There's a lot to grab onto, a lot of ways that people can be enabled to help each other through this. The CUE team does provide that little G guidance, the governance. It starts things off. It makes sure that things do keep running. You have the opportunity to do so much more with the people you already have, people that are excited to get down this path. Use that excitement.
Yeah, Todd, I actually really like what you just said there around G for guidance. Maybe this is kind of a new spin on governance. Is it's about guiding people in the right direction, because if I think about the way organizations, or at least what I would coin modern organizations, are operating right now is, traditionally we had IT here, the business here, and there was kind of a fence that went between the two. I'd have to say nowadays I'm seeing a lot less of those fences out there, and business people learning a little bit more about IT and some of the importance of standards and procedures, but not so much that it stifles innovation. And IT departments slowly starting to get a little bit more appreciation of the business and their needs and why they need to do things and some of the challenges. So I'm seeing the organizations, IT and business skills are starting to blend on top of each other, which I find is really exciting. And as you're kind of mentioning before, is IT can help provide those standards and guidance to the organization. The other key point that I really want to draw out that you kind of mentioned there is around training. We've kind of moved away from, at least in my opinion, a world of where tools would just get launched onto people's desks and we'd say, have at her, figure it out, and hope for the best. And the hope's not really a strategy, right? So taking these new tools and giving them to people and showing them how to use them properly, what some of the standards looks like, the pros and cons of doing things. We're kind of building a little bit of an architectural mindset into business users, which I find is really exciting. And the organizations that we work with, in my opinion, are the most successful, are the ones that also say, okay, here's the tools, here's how to use them, here's where to go if you need some help, so that people don't feel like they're out on their own. So the Center of Excellence concept that you mentioned a little bit earlier kind of really helps manage all that collaboration, communication, and just get people talking, right? Sometimes the Center of Excellence is just saying, you and you need to talk, we can give you information. They're just a communication broker in a lot of ways, which is really exciting. So that support is really important. Like I say, we work with a number of organizations that have the training, they have the support, they're building a Center of Excellence, and they have a sense of where they want to take these low code tools, and they are being very successful at these.
I agree. It's so exciting. And I think Todd mentioned, like, and you, Chris, the word enabling a lot. I think we should almost use empowering, because we are empowering the users by training and giving them governance and helping them succeed in their jobs.
Oh, absolutely. And looking at big G to governance to lower G governance to guidance. I mean, it's a very positive spin on something which traditionally, if you think about governance, you think about something coming from the top down, something imposing its will on you, which if you think back to, I spoke about guardrails, I spoke about a roadway, it's just guardrails, and those get narrower and narrower. As you think about big G governance, the enablement aspect of this, the training, the collaboration with the people around your organization, even taking success stories and having a person that's been developing for a bit in our organization lead a lunch and learn, and to share. This shares excitement as well. I mean, it's all about communication, enablement, collaboration. The COE team doesn't need to be, and really shouldn't be, the center of everything, where things come into them, they make a decision, then things go out from them. They are there to enable, there to set up all this structure for success. And if they're going to be the center point for decisions, they're going to need to grow, they're going to be slow, and this is going to be something that will ultimately stifle citizen development, successful citizen development in organizations.
I totally agree. And that kind of goes with what I was going to go into next, is like, why is governing the Power Platform so important? Like, why should we be thinking about this? When should we start thinking about this? Is this something that's super urgent right now for your company? And what advice can you give companies?
Yeah, the urgency. It's important. It truly is. Low code, no code revolution. It's here. I have a stat here from Wong, Driver, and Ray in 2019. Active citizen developers predicted to outnumber pro developers by 4 to 1 by next year. That is by 2023. That's crazy. That's awesome. That's exciting and scary at the same time, depending if you're in the business or in IT, typically. So this is something that it is here. In days gone past, you'd have people building and running the companies on Excel. You have a lot of people with Visual Basic. They're taking the tools that exist and are extending them as much as possible. Low code, no code, Power Platform, it is here. It's a tool for them to use right now. And this is something that could grow shadow IT exponentially. And for those that aren't aware of what shadow IT is, it's essentially the business getting the solutions they need. And they do it themselves. If they can go through IT, they do. If IT is too slow to deliver, unable to deliver, they'll do it themselves. So this is something that really needs to be provided, the roadway, the guardrails, accept Power Platform and this type of development is out there, and work with the business, partner with the business. It is so important. And again, because this is something that's growing, getting larger, it's not going away. This is an opportunity to be harnessed. Now, as far as timing goes, it is a fairly tricky balance because installing governance, installing process and everything upfront before citizen development has really done much of anything within your company, you do risk having a real heavy governance, basically a weight over top of citizen development. This is something that might squash it. It might really hinder the adoption of it. And of course, the flip side to that is reactionary. It is firefighting, and it's basically acknowledging that we have a lot of citizen development. We're not really sure how much it is. We need to get a handle on how much it is. We need to find out how many environments we have, and just realize that you're firefighting, trying to get a hold of something that's really grown organically. And in this sense, organic growth, it isn't good. It's not great for the business. It adds risk that's unknown.
Is this a similar idea to self-service analytics in Power BI?
It is a very similar idea to self-service analytics in Power BI, kind of like Todd's saying, is we're trying to enable citizen developers to go and do their work without as much IT intervention as they've had in the past. And the one thing that I find the vendors tend to lean towards is there's no IT involvement. But I say there is still IT involvement in these processes. Keeping in mind earlier on, I mentioned that business and IT are working closer than ever in my mind across organizations. We want the business users to do as much as they can on their own. And it's a bit of a tricky balance because we'll let them do a lot of work on their own, do a lot of the self-discovery on their own. They'll build applications up, and then over time, those applications might start growing in terms of data volume, subject matter, users, importance to the organization. And as those aspects of what is being developed start to grow, then there may be a time that what was once developed by the self-service developer does need to move over into a little bit more formalized and standard IT. But as Todd was kind of mentioning earlier, the best part is that whole incubation and discovery process happened without a lot of IT intervention. So the business users could do it on their own when they wanted. If they wanted to spend 500 hours playing around with things and discovering it, float your boat. That's really up to you to do. You're kind of shaping your ideas. And then once things hit a certain critical mass and importance to the organization, those are the tricky metrics to kind of get your hands wrapped around, is to then transfer it over into 24/7, 365 support so that business user or citizen developer can move on to something else, to start discovering new value elsewhere versus getting weighed down and bogged down by that application. I'm sure we've all seen this many times in organizations where somebody develops something, it's mission critical, and they can't get out from underneath it. They have no way to do it. They're the only person that's built it. It's unsupportable, untenable. What do you do at that point in time? So if we really get the self-service development working as with the business users, and then understand how to eventually transition certain things over into the IT realm, that's a good thing because we start de-risking a lot of the organization and then allowing those business users to go find more value. So we're de-risking and then enabling the people in the business to go to get that value. So I think there's all kinds of wins that can be had if we do this properly and govern this properly, or guide, I guess is what I might start saying here, the entire process.
Chris, those are amazing points. I love the idea of letting the business start with things, even if they do grow over time. They've had the idea and they're enabled to really get going with this right away. Create the MVP, the minimum viable product. Just create something that works. And this is something that if it grows over time, this can transition to IT for a full-blown IT governed solution, part of their portfolio to manage as well. But it didn't have to start there. It can start with the business right away without direct IT involvement. If the business needs a partner to help develop, IT is the partner that can help with that as well. So I love the idea. And another way of looking at this is if the business has something that they need an automation for, they can look at the process and it has 10 steps. Take steps 3 and 4. Just automate that. Just pick something small, get success with that, grow it over time as needed. This is a huge strength for this low code, no code for agile or hyper agile development, is you're not stuck with defining this process, the requirements A to Z, steps 1 through 10, and developing the entire thing at once. No, just get a wireframe, get something simple, automate part of the process, run with it for a while. If this looks great and you want to extend this to further parts of the process and that becomes business critical, okay, no big deal. Look at transitioning that to IT. Now, the flip side of that is IT needs to have some awareness of what's being developed and what's coming down the pipe for them as well. So this is where they set up some of those processes for onboarding. They work with the business, they're a partner, and this is something that doesn't get thrown over the fence. There's a process for this, and they accept that.
So let's say an organization came to either Iteration Insights or Fidelity Factory. Where would you start in, if they asked you, help me with governance, where would you guys practically start?
I think a big thing for me is to have a small team that's willing to do this, that's officially supported. To have one person at a company say, I think we need to get this done without support from higher up is going to be difficult. You're pushing a wet noodle, basically. It's not going to be something that's very successful. This does need to be supported from higher up, whether it's a sponsor, whether there's a director or some higher up level that's part of these initial meetings to at least understand what the goal of the engagement is, understand what is the long-term strategy for this. And once you have this small team identified, and I do mean small team, you don't need to identify at the very beginning, this is the CWE team. We have our architects, we have operations, we have all these different pieces. No. You work on that over time and be okay taking small steps. This is something that grows over time with intentional step after intentional step. So identify the small team, make sure they're well supported. And this team will then work with me and will identify the people for the CWE team. What are the roles that are important for you? Can you identify the people's names in there? If there are a few people wearing multiple hats, that's fine. This is a starting point. As this grows, as you discover that this work is getting larger, split it out as appropriate over time. So not a big deal there. In addition to the CWE team, identify the other stakeholders. When we talk about citizen development, you talk about setting up some governance. Well, who you're governing, who are key players there, who do you need support from? These are all things that we work for to get identified. In addition to that, identify in-scope processes as well. Like, are there processes that are important to you to govern? Development, sustainment. We talked earlier about enablement. Enablement has to be more than just a generic idea of making sure that people have training and a license. Are there some steps that are logical that you can go through for this? And finally, rounding all that out, what activities and what tools? Ideally, if you look at tools, there's no surprise here that if you have a CWE team that has automated tools to help support them in their role, they can scale a lot better than a team that is doing everything manually. That being said, if you start manual, that's okay. That's your starting point. Be okay with it, and then add pieces to this when it feels right.
Yeah, I think the big thing is there a lot of times is no perfect starting point. You got to start somewhere on one of these things. And, there are, there's organizations that still overthink all this stuff, and they're over engineering what is supposed to be a simple process. And that is just in some ways kind of legacy thinking in my mind is you need to get moving, you need to get going in the right direction, and you need to iterate on things. Things aren't going to be perfect the first time out of the gate when people are learning things. And you have to really accept that iterative mindset as an organization and really just kind of get moving on things. And I like to always kind of say, let's architect big, but deliver small in this stuff. Think about what the big picture is. And this is kind of what the COE and leadership can do around this is, where do we want to go? Ultimately, what do we need to be doing? Let's have a big picture idea and then iterate on that, because there's going to be some ideas that we take to one client that work really well and don't work well in another. So we just iterate and adapt on this stuff. There's no perfect recipe for the way all this stuff works. You just have to be prepared to start somewhere, get moving on things, adapt where necessary, make sure people understand that stuff, and just get a good rhythm established as an organization. So the big thing for me is just get going. Don't keep overthinking this stuff, because there's too much value to be had. I know a lot of times when some funny things that have happened fairly recently, especially around educating people around Power BI, is a lot of times they'll take some Power BI training, and the number one thing they'll say to us afterwards is, I wish I would have learned that 2 years ago, because let's just face it, sometimes people kind of get stuck in their ways. They do things a certain way all the time, and they haven't seen a better way to do things or some different options. And by starting to expose people to these, low code, no code tools, Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power BI, all of a sudden their eyes open and they say, hey, wait a minute, now there's actually additional things I could do, things I've been trying to do for a long time that maybe I can solve on my own. So I think it's really important to also get people out of that traditional, here's the way I've done it all the time, these are the tools I've done it, this is the way I've done it, and somehow start smashing that mold. And a lot of it is just training, education, collaboration, communication, and giving those people the support they need. As Todd was saying earlier, just giving them a license and saying, here you go, doesn't help, because they will ultimately default back to what they know and what they're comfortable doing. Because if the CEO or some higher level person or organization comes at them and they want something quick, they're going to do it the quickest way possible. Likely that's going to be a legacy tool, and we need to get people moving over into these new technologies. So get them started, get them supported.
Absolutely. I love the idea about iterative as well. Start not thinking that what you start with needs to be the end state. Just start somewhere and be okay iterating over time. As a practical example, one of the clients I've worked with previously, they set up a very small COE team, small budget, and the understanding there was, for that year, this was good. They have bigger ideas for the following year, and that was fine for them, obviously fine for me as well. It was really good to see them start and to not panic with the idea of we need to set something huge up over top. They were looking at this in an iterative fashion, looking at not just starting small and getting bigger, but before they took that step, obviously they would be reanalyzing, okay, so we run this for a few months, how are we doing? And then taking a look at, are we okay continuing for a few more months like this? Do we need to scale up again? And then to do a course correction. You have to do that compass check every so often and just be willing to make those small course corrections. You don't need to understand completely what the destination looks like. You know the journey, you know some intentional steps you can take. Just take them and be okay with the small steps.
Todd, how would you say you measure progress after you have started going in and starting the governance implementation?
Well, there's qualitative and quantitative. It's almost easier with the quantitative bit, so I'll just leave that for a second. The qualitative, and it can be the people that started the journey meet up again intentionally with their stakeholders and get a pulse check from them. How do you feel it's going? Like that type of question might seem a little too open-ended, but you're allowing it, you're opening up the window for them to just say their perceptions, to feed the perceptions back to you. Do they feel that they're well communicated? Do they feel that things are under control? Do they see the benefits because the benefits are a part of why you're doing this. You're opening up the world to something that is new and doesn't need to follow the way that this type of work has been done in the past. So that's the qualitative one. As far as quantitative goes, you can set baselines at the very beginning, get an assessment done. I mean, this is something that we help with as well. Go through and look at what environments do you have set up. I mean, it's very technical, looking at the environments, looking at data loss prevention policies, looking at licensing capacity, all these different aspects, and getting a gauge of, are they well managed or not? Do you see that some things are a little bit out of control? Well, record that state. Do that assessment later as well. Take a look at those baselines, report on them, and this is something that you can start to see changing over time. A measure is active developers. Do you see the number of active developers increasing over time? That's one sign of uptake, which is pretty cool. Now, the number of apps developed per person you can take a look at as well and read from that what you will. How about abandoned apps? If you see a lot of interest right away, and then all of a sudden this app hasn't been used for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, if that's a large number, that's really worth circling back and taking a look at what is missing and following up on as well. If the rate of abandonment isn't significant, that's pretty cool too. But it takes information. Set this up at the beginning and keep checking as you go through.
Yeah, I think those are, I would agree with Todd, those are some pretty key metrics, especially when you're getting started. Given that we do a lot in the analytics space, I see a lot of organizations having way too many KPIs around whatever subject matter we're talking about. But when you first start this off, sticking to 3 very simple KPIs, and as Todd already kind of mentioned them, is the number of users that are actually using the environment, how often things are being used, and how consistently things are being used. Is really important. And then getting a sense of the subject matter that's in there as well. So what exactly is being created in the environment, and stopping right there to start with and making sure that you understand that and make those 3 KPIs as efficient as possible. Then you can start moving into other things afterwards. But really, it's about getting people into the environment, using the environment. They're going to use the environment wrong when they first start. Very highly likely, and you're going to coach them, train them, and kind of get them back on the rails and stuff like that. That's great. At least they're in an environment. And that is one of the nice things about the cloud tools like the Power Platform, is that telemetry data is there for us to kind of monitor the environment. I've always, probably about 10 years ago, I coined the phrase BI on BI. So we're doing analytics on the analytics environment. And that telemetry is all there now to actually see what are we doing. And then we can move on to the next KPIs. But we want to keep our measurements simple and focused, and like any KPI measurement, it's going to evolve over time, and some other KPIs will become more important later on as we start moving down the line. I kind of like to, these environments like this, I've always kind of liked to, we're in Calgary here, and I'm sure every other city is just like this. We talk about having a lively downtown environment, a safe downtown environment, and stuff like that. And sometimes it's just a matter of getting people, activities, and things just kind of happening, and then that downtown core will get a vibe. It'll start getting a good feeling. The safety will start, increasing, and people feel better going down. And next thing you know, you kind of have a whole heartbeat around things. Analytics and low code is no different. The more people that start using it, the more people that start getting educated on it, the more people that help each other out. You start getting that environment built up that is safe, easy to use, and it's very lively and gets its own, kind of heartbeat, which is fantastic.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. And thank you, Todd, as well. I feel that you guys gave us such a comprehensive look at governance. Any final words or final thoughts?
A big one for me is that this is a journey. Don't think that you have to be understanding everything, having everything set up right away. Jump into this. It is something that's exciting. It's opening up new windows that really haven't been there effectively before for IT, for the business to partner to deliver on this backlog effectively, quickly. There is so much that doesn't have to fit into any traditional mold. So jump into this, just take that first step, and make sure that this is well supported from higher up as well, which involves communication upwards as well as to the citizen developers. This is a journey the organization takes together, and the C-suite team is the linchpin. Without support, this is something that withers. Chris, what are your thoughts?
No, I very much agree with you, Todd. This does need support. We do want to keep the wind in the sails around this, and in some ways, this governance month that we're kind of rallying some blogs and podcasts and thought leadership around is really meant to raise awareness around the topic, because a lot of organizations that are getting into the Power Platform, whether they're just starting or they're partway down the journey or they're headstrong into it, they may not be aware of the things they need to do to make that environment operate more effectively. So really, number one is to raise awareness. And then number two is what I mentioned earlier, is you just got to start somewhere. These things can tend to be overthought. As long as you have a framework and kind of some guiding principles around things, just get going and iterate your way towards what the final picture is ultimately going to look like.
Thank you for letting us take a bite out of your day and for tuning in with us. Stay tuned, and we'll be back soon with another episode of Byte of Analytics. You can get in touch with us at LinkedIn. We're also putting this podcast on Spotify, as well as the video portion of it on YouTube. And if you'd like to keep in touch in the meantime, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach us at info@iterationinsights.com. Thank you, and have a wonderful day, everyone.